Before you judge me, I hope you understand the context of this story. My name is Elena Morales, and I'm 54 years old. I've lived in Los Angeles, California for most of my adult life, working as a nurse at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. I have 2 children, my daughter Anna, who is 28 and lives nearby with her family, and my son Carlos, who is 31 and hasn't spoken to me in over 4 years. The silence between Carlos and me began on a rainy Thursday evening in March 2020, during a family dinner that was supposed to celebrate his engagement to his girlfriend, Jennifer. What should have been a joyful occasion turned into the worst fight of our lives, one that would tear our family apart and leave wounds that seemed impossible to heal. Carlos had always been different from Anna. Where she was gentle and understanding, he was stubborn and proud. Where she sought compromise, he demanded his way. But despite his difficult personality, I loved him fiercely. He was my firstborn, the baby I had carried for 9 months while working double shifts to save money, the child I had raised alone, after his father abandoned us when Carlos was only 3 years old. That March evening, Carlos brought Jennifer to our house for dinner. Jennifer was a lovely girl, blonde, well-educated, from a wealthy family in Beverly Hills. She worked as a marketing executive and spoke with the confidence of someone who had never known real struggle. I had always been polite to her, but I sensed that she looked down on our modest home in East LA, our simple furnishings, and the fact that her future mother-in-law was a nurse rather than a doctor or lawyer. The trouble started when Carlos announced their wedding plans. They wanted to get married at the Beverly Hills Hotel with a reception for 300 guests, an open bar, and a 5-course dinner that would cost more than I made in 6 months. "That sounds beautiful," I said, trying to be supportive while mentally calculating costs I knew Carlos couldn't afford on his teacher's salary. "We're hoping you can help with some of the expenses," Carlos said, avoiding my eyes. "Jennifer's parents are covering most of it, but we need about $15,000 for the flowers, photography, and music." $15,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. I made decent money as a nurse, but I had been saving every penny for years to buy a small house in a better neighborhood, away from the gang activity that had been getting worse around our apartment complex. "Carlos, you know I would do anything for you," I said carefully. "But I don't have that kind of money right now. I've been saving for a house." "A house?" Jennifer interrupted, her voice sharp with disbelief. "Carlos, you told me your mother had money saved up. You said she could afford to help us." I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. Carlos had been lying to his fiancée about our financial situation, probably trying to impress her family by making it seem like we were wealthier than we actually were. "I do have some savings," I explained, "but it's taken me years to save enough for a down payment on a house. This neighborhood isn't safe anymore, and I've been working overtime shifts just to—" "So you're choosing a house over your son's wedding?" Jennifer asked, her voice getting louder. "What kind of mother does that?" Anna, who had been quietly eating her dinner, looked up with alarm. "Jennifer, that's not fair. Mom has been working so hard to—" "Stay out of this, Anna," Carlos snapped at his sister. Then he turned to me with a look of cold anger I'd never seen before. "You know what, Mom? I should have known you'd find a way to disappoint me. You've always been selfish." "Selfish?" I stood up from the table, my hands shaking with hurt and anger. "I raised you and your sister alone from the time you were 3 years old. I worked nights so I could be home with you during the day. I went without new clothes, without vacations, without dating, so I could give you everything you needed. How is that selfish? Because now, when I finally need something important from you, you're choosing yourself over your family." "Carlos, this isn't about choosing myself. This is about being responsible with money I've worked incredibly hard to save. You're 31 years old. You and Jennifer both have good jobs. Why can't you save up for your own wedding?" Jennifer laughed bitterly. "Because normal families help each other out. My parents are contributing $60,000 to our wedding. They understand what family means." The comparison stung, especially because I knew it was designed to make me feel inadequate. Jennifer's father was a successful businessman who probably made more in a month than I made in a year. "I'm not Jennifer's parents," I said quietly. "I'm a single mother who has done her best with limited resources." "Limited because you make bad choices," Carlos said, his voice cruel in a way that shocked me. "You could have remarried. You could have gone back to school and become a doctor instead of staying a nurse. You could have done a lot of things differently, but you chose the easy path." His words felt like daggers. The easy path? Working 16-hour shifts while raising 2 children alone was the easy path? Going to nursing school at night while taking care of a sick mother was the easy path? "Get out," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What?" I said, "Get out of my house. Both of you." Carlos stood up, his face red with anger. "Fine, but don't expect me to come crawling back. And don't expect an invitation to the wedding." "Carlos, please." Anna tried to intervene, but he was already grabbing his jacket. "No, Anna, I'm done. I'm done pretending that Mom cares about anyone but herself. Come on, Jennifer, let's go." As they stormed out, Jennifer turned back to me with a satisfied smile. "You know, Carlos is better off without you anyway. You've been holding him back his whole life." The door slammed, and the house fell into crushing silence. Anna immediately came over to hug me as I collapsed back into my chair, tears streaming down my face. "Mom, he didn't mean it," she said. But we both knew that wasn't true. That was the last time I saw or spoke to Carlos. He married Jennifer 6 months later in the elaborate Beverly Hills wedding they wanted, funded entirely by her parents. I found out about it through Anna, who had been invited but chose not to go in solidarity with me. Over the next 4 years, I reached out to Carlos dozens of times. I sent birthday cards, Christmas gifts, and texts asking if we could talk. Every attempt was met with silence. When Anna had her first baby, I asked if she thought Carlos might come to the hospital to meet his nephew. He didn't. I moved into my small house in a safer neighborhood, the one I had saved so hard for. But the joy of home ownership was overshadowed by the empty bedroom I had hoped Carlos might visit someday. Anna and her family came over regularly, and her children filled some of the loneliness, but there was always a Carlos-shaped hole in every holiday, every family gathering, every important moment. Jennifer, I learned through Anna, made sure to remind Carlos regularly about what a terrible mother I was. She told him I was jealous of their success, that I was bitter about being single, that I was trying to manipulate him with guilt. Carlos, who had always been susceptible to strong personalities, seemed to believe everything she said. As the years passed, I began to accept that I might never see my son again. The boy I had carried in my arms through countless sleepless nights, the child I had cheered for at every soccer game and school play, the young man I had helped through heartbreak and disappointment, had chosen to erase me from his life completely. I threw myself into my work at the hospital, picking up extra shifts and volunteering for the most challenging cases. Helping other families heal became my way of coping with the fracture in my own. My colleagues often commented on my dedication, not knowing that work was the only thing that kept me from falling apart completely. What I didn't know was that Carlos's life was about to take a devastating turn, one that would force him to confront not just his mortality, but the value of the relationships he had thrown away. The call that would change everything was coming, and it would make him realize that sometimes the people we push away are the only ones who can save us. On a Tuesday morning in September 2024, I was working my shift in the kidney transplant unit at Cedars-Sinai when my phone rang. It was Anna, and she was crying so hard I could barely understand what she was saying. "Mom, you need to sit down," she said between sobs. "It's Carlos. He's in the hospital." My heart stopped. Despite everything that had happened between us, Carlos was still my son, and the thought of him being seriously hurt sent waves of panic through my entire body. "What happened? Is he okay? Which hospital?" "He's here, at Cedars. Mom, it's bad. Really bad. He's been sick for months, but Jennifer didn't want him to see a doctor because she said it was just stress from work. But yesterday, he collapsed at school, and the kids called 911. I was already taking off my scrubs and grabbing my purse. I'm coming down there right now. Mom, wait. There's something else. Jennifer said, Carlos doesn't want to see you. She told the nurses that you're not allowed in his room. The words hit me like a slap, but they didn't surprise me. Even facing a serious illness, Carlos was still holding on to his anger. What's wrong with him? I asked, trying to keep my voice professional even though my hands were shaking. They're running tests, but the doctor said something about his kidneys. They think he might have kidney disease. Kidney disease. In my 15 years working in the transplant unit, I had seen hundreds of cases of kidney failure, and I knew how serious it could be, especially in someone as young as Carlos. I went down to the emergency department, hoping to catch a glimpse of my son, but Jennifer was standing guard outside his room like a sentinel. When she saw me approaching, her face twisted with familiar disdain. I told the nurses you weren't welcome here, she said, blocking my path. Carlos doesn't want to see you. I'm not here as his mother, I lied. I work in the transplant unit, upstairs. I wanted to see if there was anything I could do professionally. We don't need your help. Carlos has excellent insurance through the school district, and we can afford the best doctors. I wanted to tell her that money couldn't buy everything, that sometimes love and family were more valuable than the best insurance plans, but I knew it would fall on deaf ears. Instead, I went back to my unit and used my access to the hospital's computer system to look up Carlos's case. What I found made my blood run cold. Carlos had been diagnosed with rapidly progressing glomerulonephritis, a condition that was destroying his kidneys at an alarming rate. His kidney function was already down to 30% and dropping fast. Without intervention, he would need dialysis within months, and eventually a kidney transplant. Over the next several weeks, I watched from a distance as Carlos's condition deteriorated. Anna kept me updated on his progress, telling me about the various treatments the doctors were trying, none of which seemed to be working. Carlos had to stop teaching because he was too weak to stand for long periods. Jennifer had to cut back her hours at work to take care of him. The worst part was knowing that I could help but being unable to do anything. As a transplant nurse, I knew the statistics. Carlos was young and otherwise healthy, which made him a good candidate for a transplant, but finding a donor match could take years. The waiting list for kidney donors in California was over 17,000 people long, and the average wait time was 4 to 5 years. But I also knew something else that could change everything. Living donors could dramatically reduce the wait time. A brother, sister, parent, or even a friend who was a compatible match could donate one kidney and save a life immediately. I had been tested years ago as part of a workplace volunteer program, so I knew my blood type and basic tissue markers. Carlos and I shared the same blood type, O positive, which was a good start. But compatibility involved much more than just blood type. One evening in November, Anna came to visit me at home, and I could see the strain of the past few months written all over her face. She looked exhausted, worried, and older than her 28 years. "How is he?" I asked, even though I was afraid to hear the answer. "Not good, Mom. The doctors want to start him on dialysis next month. They said his kidney function is down to 15%. And the transplant evaluation? They put him on the waiting list, but they said it could be years before a donor becomes available. Jennifer's family all got tested, but none of them were compatible. She asked Carlos if he wanted to reach out to our side of the family, but he said no." Anna nodded, tears starting to form in her eyes. "Mom, I got tested. I want to donate a kidney to him, but I'm not a good enough match. The doctor said there's too high a risk of rejection." My heart ached for Anna. She was willing to undergo major surgery to save her brother, even though he had treated her poorly during our family fight. That was the kind of person Anna was, generous and forgiving to a fault. "What about me?" I asked quietly. "What about you?" "Have the doctors considered me as a potential donor?" Anna looked at me with surprise. "Mom, Carlos won't even speak to you. Do you really think he would accept a kidney from you?" "That's not the question. The question is whether I would be a compatible donor." Anna was quiet for a long moment, processing what I was suggesting. "You would really do that? After everything he's said to you, after the way he's treated you?" "Anna, he's my son. I don't care how angry he is at me. I don't care what Jennifer has told him about me. I don't care about anything except saving his life. But Mom, what if you get tested and you're not compatible either? What if you go through all of this and it doesn't help? Then at least I'll know I tried everything I could." That night, I lay awake thinking about the decision I was about to make. Donating a kidney was major surgery with real risks. There was a chance of complications, a long recovery period, and the knowledge that I would be living with only one kidney for the rest of my life. But there was also the chance that I could save my son's life. The next morning, I called Dr. Patricia Williams, the head of the transplant program at Cedars-Sinai. I had worked with Dr. Williams for years, and she knew about my estrangement from Carlos. "Elena, are you sure about this?" she asked when I explained what I wanted to do. "The testing process is extensive, and there's no guarantee that Carlos will accept the donation even if you're compatible." "I'm sure," I said. "I need to know if I can help him." "Okay, but I have to warn you, if you are compatible, we'll need to have some very difficult conversations with Carlos about accepting the donation. He's going to have to make a choice between his pride and his life." The testing process began the following week. Blood draws, tissue typing, cross-matching, psychological evaluations, and a battery of medical tests to ensure that I was healthy enough to undergo the surgery. Each test brought me closer to an answer that would change all of our lives. What I didn't know was that Carlos's condition was deteriorating faster than anyone expected, and that time was running out. Soon, his doctors would have to present him with an impossible choice: accept help from the mother he had rejected, or face the very real possibility of dying while waiting for a donor who might never come. 3 weeks into December 2024, I received the call I had been anxiously waiting for. Dr. Williams asked me to come to her office to discuss the results of my donor compatibility testing. As I walked through the familiar hallways of Cedars-Sinai, my heart was pounding with a mixture of hope and terror. "Elena, please sit down," Dr. Williams said, her expression unreadable. "I have the results of your compatibility testing with Carlos." I gripped the arms of the chair, preparing myself for disappointment. "And? You're a nearly perfect match. Blood type, tissue markers, cross-match, everything looks excellent. In fact, in my 20 years doing transplants, I've rarely seen such a close compatibility between a parent and child." Relief and joy flooded through me, followed immediately by the crushing realization that being compatible was only half the battle. "Does Carlos know?" "That's what we need to discuss. Carlos's condition has deteriorated significantly over the past week. His kidney function is now down to 8%, and he's starting to show signs of uremia, kidney toxicity that's affecting his brain function. We need to start dialysis immediately, and we need to have the transplant conversation with him today." What does that mean for the timeline? It means we can't wait for a deceased donor. If Carlos is going to survive this, he needs a living donor transplant within the next few months. And right now, you're his only viable option. Dr. Williams leaned forward in her chair, her expression serious. "Elena, I need you to understand what you're offering to do. Kidney donation is major surgery. You'll be in the hospital for about a week, and full recovery takes 2 to 3 months. There are risks: bleeding, infection, blood clots. And while most people live completely normal lives with one kidney, there are long-term considerations." "I understand all of that," I said. "The question is whether Carlos will accept it." That's the conversation I need to have with him this afternoon. But before I do, I need to know, are you absolutely certain about this decision? Because once I tell Carlos that you're willing to donate, there's no taking it back. I thought about the last 4 years of silence, the missed birthdays and holidays, the way Carlos had cut me out of his life so completely. I thought about Jennifer's cruel words and Carlos's anger. But then I thought about the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, the teenager who called me after his first heartbreak, the young man who once told me I was the strongest person he knew. I'm certain, I said. He's my son. Nothing else matters. Dr. Williams nodded. I'll talk to him today. But Elena, you need to be prepared for the possibility that he'll refuse. His pride has kept him away from you for 4 years. It might keep him from accepting this gift as well. That afternoon, I went to work as usual, but I couldn't concentrate on anything. Every few minutes, I found myself checking my phone, waiting for news from Dr. Williams. At around 3 o'clock, Anna called me, crying. Mom, Dr. Williams just left. Carlos's room. Jennifer is furious, and Carlos asked to see you. My hands started shaking. He wants to see me? Yes. He's asking if you'll come to his room. Mom, he looks terrible. The illness has really taken a toll on him. I left work immediately and went down to the kidney unit where Carlos was being treated. Outside his room, I paused to collect myself. I hadn't seen my son in over 4 years, and I didn't know what to expect. When I walked into the room, I barely recognized the man lying in the hospital bed. Carlos had always been tall and strong, with an athlete's build from his years playing soccer. Now he looked gaunt and pale, with dark circles under his eyes and the yellowish tint to his skin that indicated kidney failure. Mama, he said quietly, using the name he hadn't called me since childhood. Mijo, I replied, moving to his bedside. How are you feeling? Like I'm dying, he said with a weak smile. Which apparently I am. Jennifer was sitting in the corner of the room, her arms crossed and her expression hostile. Carlos, you don't have to do this. My parents are looking into private donors. We can find another way. Carlos ignored her and looked directly at me. Dr. Williams told me you're willing to give me one of your kidneys. Yes. Why? The question was so simple, but the answer was everything. Because you're my son, and I love you. Even after everything I said to you? Even after the way I've treated you? I reached out and took his hand, which felt thin and cold. Carlos, you could spend the rest of your life hating me, and I would still love you. You could never speak to me again after this surgery, and I would still give you my kidney. That's what love means. It doesn't have conditions. Tears started, streaming down Carlos's face. I've been so stupid, Mom. So incredibly stupid. You've been hurt and angry. Those are normal emotions. No, it's more than that. Carlos looked over at Jennifer, who was glaring at both of us. I let other people influence how I felt about you. I let pride and anger cloud my judgment. I believed things about you that I knew weren't true. Jennifer stood up abruptly. Carlos, you're not thinking clearly. The kidney failure is affecting your brain. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying, Carlos replied, his voice stronger than it had been since I'd entered the room. I'm saying that I've wasted 4 years being angry at the wrong person. The wrong person? Your mother chose money over your wedding. No, Carlos said firmly. My mother chose financial responsibility over enabling my poor planning and unrealistic expectations. She was trying to teach me to be independent and make smart decisions. I was too proud to listen. Jennifer's face was turning red with anger. I can't believe you're falling for her manipulation again. She's only offering to do this to control you, to make you feel guilty. Jennifer, stop. Carlos's voice was quiet but firm. Just stop. I could see the dynamic that had been playing out for years. Jennifer had been feeding Carlos's resentment, constantly reminding him of our fight, never allowing him to heal or forgive. She had built her relationship with Carlos partly on his estrangement from me, and now that foundation was crumbling. Dr. Williams said the surgery could happen within 2 weeks if we move quickly, I said. But Carlos, I need you to know that this is your choice. If you're not comfortable accepting the kidney from me, I understand. Carlos squeezed my hand. Mom, I would be honored to accept this gift from you, but I need to know, can you forgive me for the things I said, for the way I've treated you? There's nothing to forgive, I said, and I meant it. You're my son. That's all that matters now. Over the next hour, we talked about the surgery, the recovery process, and the future. Jennifer sat in sullen silence, occasionally making snide comments that Carlos increasingly ignored. I could see that the crisis was forcing him to reevaluate, not just his relationship with me, but his marriage as well. As I was preparing to leave, Carlos called my name. Mom? Yes? Thank you for never giving up on me, for being willing to save my life even after I tried to cut you out of it. That's what mothers do, I said. We love our children no matter what. That night, Anna came over to my house, and we talked until dawn about the surgery, about Carlos, and about the healing that was finally beginning to happen in our family. Mom, are you scared? She asked as we sat on my couch, drinking tea and watching the sunrise through my living room window. Terrified, I admitted, but not of the surgery. I'm scared that this might be our only chance to rebuild our relationship, and I don't want to waste it. What I didn't know was that the surgery would be just the beginning of our healing journey, and that the greatest challenges were still ahead of us. The surgery was scheduled for January 15th, 2025. In the weeks leading up to it, Carlos and I had several long conversations, slowly rebuilding the connection that had been severed for so many years. He told me about his life during our estrangement, his struggles at work, his growing disillusionment with his marriage, and his realization that he had made a terrible mistake in cutting me out of his life. Jennifer, meanwhile, became increasingly hostile as Carlos's attitude toward me shifted. She accused him of being manipulated by his illness, of making decisions he would regret later. When Carlos suggested that maybe she should try to build a better relationship with me, she responded by threatening to leave him. Maybe that wouldn't be such a bad thing, Carlos confided to me during one of our pre-surgery meetings. I've been unhappy for years, Mom. I just didn't want to admit that I'd made another mistake. The night before the surgery, Anna organized a small family dinner at my house. Carlos was there, looking nervous but determined, along with Anna, her husband, and their 2 young children. It was the first time in over 4 years that we had all been together, and despite the circumstances, it felt like a celebration. I want to say something, Carlos announced, as we sat around my dining room table, the same table where our terrible fight had taken place years earlier. I want to apologize to all of you for the way I've acted. I let my pride and anger drive me to hurt the people who loved me most. Carlos, you don't need to, Anna started to say, but he held up his hand. Yes, I do. Anna, I'm sorry for treating you badly when you tried to stay neutral during my fight with Mom. You were just trying to keep our family together, and I made that impossible. Anna was crying now, reaching across the table to squeeze her brother's hand. And Mom? Carlos continued, turning to me with tears in his eyes. I'm sorry for believing that you didn't love me enough. I'm sorry for accusing you of being selfish when you've been the most selfless person I've ever known. And I'm sorry for wasting 4 years when we could have been in each other's lives. We can't change the past, I said, but we can make the future better. That's what I want to do. I want to be the son you deserve. I want to be the brother Anna deserves. I want to be the uncle these kids deserve. He gestured to Anna's children, who were playing quietly in the corner. The surgery itself went perfectly. Dr. Williams later told me that it was one of the smoothest kidney transplants she had ever performed. My kidney began functioning immediately in Carlos's body, and within hours, his color was returning to normal as the toxins that had been building up in his system were finally being filtered out. I woke up in recovery to find Carlos in the bed. Next to mine, the transplant team had arranged for us to share a room during our initial recovery period. It was surreal to be lying there, each of us missing a kidney, but both of us whole in a way we hadn't been in years. "How do you feel?" Carlos asked me, his voice still groggy from anesthesia. "Like I just gave my son the greatest gift I could give him," I replied. "You saved my life, Mom." "You saved mine too," I said. "You came back to me." The recovery process brought us even closer together. Carlos needed help with daily activities for several weeks, and Jennifer made it clear that she wasn't interested in playing caregiver to someone she thought was making poor decisions. So Anna and I took turns staying with him, helping him with medications, driving him to follow-up appointments, and simply being there as he healed. It was during this time that Carlos finally opened up about his marriage. He told me about years of feeling controlled and manipulated, about Jennifer's constant criticism of our family, and about her attempts to isolate him from anyone who might question her influence. "She told me that loving you was a sign of weakness," Carlos said one afternoon as we sat on his couch, both of us still moving carefully as we recovered from surgery. "She said that successful people don't let their families hold them back." "And what do you think now?" I asked. "I think that cutting off your family is the weakness. I think that love is what makes us strong." 2 months after the surgery, Carlos filed for divorce. Jennifer was furious, threatening to take everything in the settlement, but Carlos had already decided that his freedom was worth more than any material possessions. "I'd rather start over with nothing than continue living a lie," he told me. Divorce was messy and expensive, but Carlos emerged from it with his integrity intact and his family relationships restored. He moved into a small apartment near Anna and me, and for the first time in years, he seemed genuinely happy. 6 months after the transplant, we celebrated Carlos's 32nd birthday with a family barbecue in my backyard. As I watched him, playing soccer with Anna's children, running and laughing without any sign of the illness that had nearly killed him, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "You know what the best part of this whole experience has been?" Carlos said to me as we cleaned up after the party. "What's that?" "Realizing that I never actually lost your love. It was always there, waiting for me to come back to it. It always will be," I told him. Today, more than a year after the transplant, Carlos and I have a stronger relationship than we ever had before. The crisis taught us both valuable lessons about the importance of family, the danger of pride, and the power of unconditional love. Carlos has started dating again, a wonderful teacher named Maria who works at his school and who loves our family gatherings. Anna's children adore their uncle, and he's made up for lost time by being the most devoted uncle imaginable. As for me, I live completely normally with one kidney, just as the doctors predicted. But more importantly, I live with the knowledge that when my son needed me most, I was able to save his life, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually as well. The silence between us lasted 4 years, but the healing that followed has been worth every moment of pain we endured to get here. Sometimes we have to lose everything to realize what truly matters. Sometimes the people we push away are the only ones who can save us. And sometimes love really is stronger than pride, anger, and time itself. Carlos learned that family isn't about being perfect or never making mistakes. It's about being there for each other when it matters most. And I learned that a mother's love doesn't have an expiration date. It waits patiently for as long as it takes for our children to find their way back home.